Hey everyone, welcome back to So Wizard Podcast rundown of AFI's 100 Years, 100 Movies, 10th Anniversary Edition. Before we get started, please remember to subscribe to our channel. It really helps us grow our audience. Now, number 88 on the list is 1938's Bringing Up Baby. This movie is currently available through HBO Max, which has a really great collection of restored classics. So I was pretty excited to jump into this week's movie. Of course, I had known the names Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant for a long time, but I had little to no exposure to these classic talents. When the movie got rolling, I saw a Cary Grant that had not been the projected image in my head. He was a lot more bumbling and goofy than the legendary Cary Grant is remembered for, or at least my perception of it. But that's kind of the point. He was killing his role in this early comedy. Not too far after seeing Grant, audiences get introduced to Hepburn. She is stunning, her attitude is infectious, and her performance is pitch perfect. And as a quick aside, when Cate Blanchett portrays Katharine Hepburn in The Aviator, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, wow, did she do a good job. The story of Bringing Up Baby gets a little convoluted, so stick with me. I'll try to do this as brief and concise as possible. The movie follows David Huxley, played by Grant, who's a mild-mannered paleontologist. Think Christopher Reeve's portrayal of Clark Kent without the Superman of it. I wanted to work mild manner in to get to the Clark Kent reference and comparison, but really Huxley is overly passive, and that's where all of his problems come in. Huxley is set to marry Alice Swallow, played by Virginia Walker. A woman who works either for him or with him, I'm not quite sure exactly what her role is, and she's clearly into his intellect as a paleontologist, as I mentioned, but she makes it clear their marriage is one of professionalism and has nothing to do with love or attraction. I have no idea how this marriage would further the career of a paleontologist or his assistant, boss, I don't even know what her role was, but that's it, that's the setting. So the two are set to marry the very next day from when we meet them. They find out that on the same day, their wedding day, that a dig they have going on in Utah is supposed to send them a missing bone, the last piece of a skeleton of a Brachiosaurus Huxley is reconstructing on the day we meet him. Still, the day before his wedding, Huxley has to go out to convince a lawyer to convince that lawyer's client to grant the museum $1 million. Now, keep in mind that's $1 million in 1938, so pretty huge. He runs into Suzanne Vance, the glorious Katharine Hepburn. His bumbling awkwardness and her carefree attitude are the perfect storm to have a series of unfortunate events completely upturn Huxley's life. The two go through a series of increasingly insane events that include a jaguar, affectionate as a house cat, a dog that steals and hides the fossil, Vance's aunt being the very same beneficiary Huxley was trying to impress, which of course he makes a horrible impression, then they have to lie about his identity, a second jaguar that's very aggressive and on its way to be killed because of it, more mistaken identities, and more comedic mishaps. I told you it gets a bit convoluted, but as the characters roll on, it never really bothered me. It actually didn't even really hit me as convoluted until my wife asked what the movie was even about. Each piece is introduced in its own time and leads to the next thing. The pacing is actually pretty great, and the movie never drags, not for a second. In fact, the third act could have even been a bit longer to really nail things down on the emotional, romantic story part of it. I've always tried to have a well-rounded view on storytelling in movies, and I've always tried to watch all genres from all eras. My pre-1970s film experiences are admittedly pretty weak. I always go into these older movies with some excitement at a new experience, but also some apprehension. I'm worried that the old style of filmmaking will drag, or the comedy wouldn't have aged well, or some more of the nuances would have been lost at me in a 2020 mindset, ready for now. The comedy in Bringing Up Baby is sharp-witted at its best and slapsticky at its worst. But when it's slapsticky, it's never to the point of painfully stupid. The jokes aren't as cutting or falling into the modern standard, but why would they? This movie is 82 years old, and even at 82 years old, you can see the sharp wit and comedic timing in the script, as well as the performances by the actors on the screen. Hepburn is a bombshell, a classic actress, Grant is handsome, charming, and a legendary actor, but the two bumble around and step on each other's lines with this rapid-paced ease that makes the movie feel improvised. And I found out along the way that that feeling of improvisation is not without merit. While digging into the annals of history on this movie, much of the comedic lines were ad-libbed by the two leads. They are also both experts in physical comedy, and it never gets as stupid as, say, the older Pink Panther movies, which I can't stomach. So as impressed I was with the comedy, I was equally disappointed at the romantic angle. If you've been following this list, or just my review videos of the list for a while now, you'll know we've been through a few of these silver screen classics. They all seem to be following the same formula when it comes to the romantic plots. There's always a guy who's already with a woman, and they're generally on the verge of getting married. The guy goes off on some adventure and meets the new woman who he ends up with. That in itself isn't the worst crime for a movie, though it sounds pretty scummy saying it out loud. The big crime in these romantic plots, and the plot in Bringing Up Baby is no exception, is the lack of development along the way. Yes, Cary Grant ends up with Katharine Hepburn because it's Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn, but story-wise, that's not enough for me. So, Huxley and Swallow are set to be married at the start of the movie. There is some dialogue saying that it's not a marriage of love, and I guess that way we don't have to feel bad about Swallow being kicked to the curb later. And I think in the movie she actually does the dumping, but whatever. Then we meet Hepburn's Vance, who has all the charm and beauty of Hepburn. Of course, why wouldn't she? She's played by the actress. So we like her instantly. Vance doesn't see any issue with how she interacts with the world. She's very carefree and just kind of falls into things and has her own view and her own understanding. But the somewhat stuffy Huxley cannot stand her when they meet, which is funny and makes a lot of sense, and somehow that leads to them being in love. Okay. Vance sees something in Huxley from the start, but I never felt like the audience was clued in as to what it was or why. She even says at some point, to her aunt I believe, that she's going to marry that man, he just doesn't know it yet. It's charming in a teenage crush kind of way, but I still felt like it kind of came out of nowhere. Huxley takes a bit longer to come around, and when he finally reveals his feeling, it puts some of this lack of development at ease, but not enough, at least not to me. His admission of his feelings is very in character, and there is a logical path to it. You can follow the strings as to why he feels this way and to why he's only coming around to it now. I'll admit I'm not the hugest fan of romantic movies. It's never been my go-to genre, but if you're going to tell that story, then fully tell that story. When Bringing Up Baby debuted, it was not a rousing success. Director Howard Hawks' reputation took a big hit for what was originally considered a failure. Some tarnish also hit Hepburn's reputation, as this was her first foray into comedy. Now, you wouldn't have guessed any of this by the way the movie is on multiple best of all time lists, and you also wouldn't guess that about Hepburn, that she was new to comedy, given her performance in this movie. I think what happened ultimately is that Bringing Up Baby was ahead of its time. The frantic pacing, quick dialogue, snappy wit. I mean, they even throw a gay joke into there, which now obviously has not aged well, but kind of became a thing in comedies through the 80s and 90s, maybe even earlier. There's a lot of comedic tropes and elements that felt very modern watching this in 2020. Maybe the 1938 audience wasn't used to these elements and needed time to adjust. These comedic things caught on, and Baby became, maybe not a template, but definitely something of inspiration for future works in comedy. And I want to clarify something at the gay joke. I'm not saying that that alone makes it modern, but up until this point, you couldn't really acknowledge gay or say the word gay on screen. You couldn't even portray a gay character. You had to shroud him in innuendo. We talked a lot about what I thought was the bulk of the movie, and then I realized that there were live predatory animals with the actors. Some scenes were done with trick photography, practical shots merged together, maybe a depth of field that was thrown off by the camera, but in other scenes it is clear that the jaguar is actually interacting with real people. This is an incredibly ballsy move, putting a live predatory animal with big-name actors. This movie must have employed some fantastic animal handlers. And the performances by the actors interacting with these animals is even more impressive that you never get the sense that while they're trying to play it off casually, they're about to piss themselves. I'm going to prefer not to dwell on the level of animal abuse that must have taken place in this era because, ugh. Overshadowed a bit by the Jaguar co-star, there is also a dog who has a fairly large role in the plot who also does a great job and hopefully was abused a lot less. I had a hard time finding many specifics about the critical and audience reactions of Bringing Up Baby when it hit theaters. Wikipedia had links to mostly articles of praise, but then other articles I found on entertainment sites and film history sites mentioned the dislike of the movie on its initial release. The movie had an estimated budget of just over $1 million and grossed only $11,000. Being 1938 and theaters not what they are today or what they were before COVID killed them, it's hard to say what movies should have been bringing in, but I can't imagine studios were ever thrilled with their movie not making its budget back, and they didn't even have the benefit of a secondary market like VHS or DVD rentals or sales or, now, streaming. Now this next bit may be a first on our AFI 100 Years 100 Movies journey, and probably rare as the list goes on, even all the way down to number 1, but Bringing Up Baby didn't win any awards when it came out, not even nominated. Again, given the year, it's hard to say how many awards were really possible, but it wasn't until 1990 that Baby got an award. In 1990, it won its place in the National Film Registry, and in 2009, it won an award from the OFTA Film Hall of Fame. Well, that's going to do it for 1938's Bringing Up Baby. I'm looking forward to seeing Cary Grant, and even more so, Katharine Hepburn, as our list goes on. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe to our channel for more. Be sure to listen to So Wizard Podcast wherever you get your podcasts. So Wizard Podcast can also be found on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month you get multiple monthly bonus shows. SoWizardPodcast.com is your resource for reviews, recommendations, merchandise, and more. We love hearing feedback, so drop us a note in the comments, leave us something on social media. Make sure you come back next week for number 87, 12 Angry Men.